All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 1 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. As those of you who have not heard before, from the old T-Bone Funky show, I have got rid of that baggage, Tommy, and we've added Mr. Matt Dernlan. Matt, how is everything there in Ohio?
Fantastic. Excited to hear from you. Excited to partner with you. As we introduced a couple weeks ago, we've joined into an official partnership with you to be a official content provider for all things RUDIS. We started rolling out, some of the first things you're going to be doing with us with your Metal Mondays. And if you haven't caught it yet, I strongly suggest anybody that's looking for a mental edge in the sport of wrestling on all levels, check that out every Monday morning. Metal Monday.
And so, Matt, where that came from, and I got to say, I was just joking about my old partner, Tommy. Tommy's obviously a partner at RUDIS. We had a great podcast for almost 3 years, and, frankly, he's just a little bit too busy to keep going. So for those of you who didn't understand the sarcasm was there. I don't want anyone to think like I really was annoyed with Tommy or anything. So,
and Tommy's gone, but he's not forgotten. He's going to be making guest appearances on the podcast here hopefully as frequently as he possibly can.
Yes, exactly. So, I'm hoping that Tommy will come in once in a while for the Mental Mondays. You know where it actually got started, Matt? My wife was talking about, we were just sitting around talking about like all the old letter to the editors, where someone would write into a newspaper and maybe be relationship advice or work advice or whatever. And she said, we could do that on camera. We should do marriage advice. It'd be kind of funny. I thought, wow, that'd be funny. But, we've only been married 5 years, 6 years. But you can't give people marriage advice when you've been married 5 or 6 years. It's just not. It's disingenuous. And so I said, what I could give people advice on, though? I could give people advice on the mental aspect of wrestling, because I always had people asking about it. And it's something I feel very, very confident about talking. So I started, I just picked my own first topic. I started rolling. And then I said, anyone who has questions, just send me a message on Facebook. And so I just would get question after question after question. And now actually, when I travel around with my own kids to tournaments, Mental Mondays are genuinely kind of one of people's favorite things I do. That's probably what I get complimented on the most by parents and other coaches and athletes, is that they love checking out the Mental Mondays. And I, obviously, as I talk about on there, I think it is a very neglected part of coaching. I think it's something that we as wrestling, so I'm a wrestling coach also, we as wrestling coaches need to spend a little more time on. And, it is hard. A lot of people say wrestling is 90% mental, but no one literally spends 20% of their practice on the mental aspect of it.
And like you said, it's the most neglected and overlooked, but it's actually the most critical for your success in a lot of ways. And I think we both have a shared passion for sports psychology. So for anybody that's looking to gain an extra edge, strongly suggest tune in Mental Mondays every Monday morning with Ben. So
absolutely. Yeah. So Matt, so everyone knows exactly what you're doing, and we're going to get into you in a second, but so everyone knows what you're doing. RUDIS is kind of starting a media arm. We're not going to try to be Flow Wrestling right away, right? Because what they're doing is amazing. But we do want to add to the economy of wrestling, and that's something Tommy Rowlands and I talked about a lot on our podcast. Is a major sport, football, basketball, baseball, right? They have hundreds of outlets covering them, from newspapers to magazines to TV to online. And wrestling, if you really think about how many people really genuinely cover wrestling, the answer is not very many. We have a few magazines that go out monthly. We obviously have Flow Wrestling. Track Wrestling is trying to get in there and do something. Few other websites, but there's not a huge amount of people that cover wrestling. So we just want to add to that coverage. We want to build stars. We want to give the sport that we love so much more exposure. So I don't know if you can elaborate. I don't listen, Matt. You guys are secretive. There's some stuff you won't even tell me, and I work for you guys. So I don't know how much you're willing to tell our audience about all of the projects that you guys have lined up and planned moving forward.
Well, we're in the midst of building it out. And like you said, what we want to do is add to the conversation of wrestling. I think we've started capturing a pretty big reach in the apparel industry and speaking to wrestling's look and wrestling's feel from an apparel standpoint. But I think, what we're doing, what you and I are doing here is I think we have something to say, from a conversation piece about the sport of wrestling. And that's what we want to provide. I mean, what we target for with all our clothing lines and the new shoe and everything that Cael is doing right now is we want to be original, we want to be authentic, and we want to be, as informed as we possibly can be and inform our consumers as well as we possibly can about what's going on in the sport of wrestling. So adding you, as a partner in the company, we actually were in another area of the country this week, locking in another content provider, and we should be rolling out, that partnership here in the coming weeks and months. And we have a number of different content pieces that we're developing right now. We're brainstorming, building out.
So Matt,
building out
you're being really ambiguous.
Yeah,
I'm going to cut you off because you're not
Yes,
telling people anything. So here's the deal: we're going to start with we got a podcast, we got some technique, we got some Mental Mondays, and we're going to do a lot of other really cool things that Matt is not willing to tell you guys yet. So, Matt, let's get into you a little bit. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
People got used to me over the last 109 episodes of the T-Row and Funky Show. But you obviously have a rich history in the background of wrestling. So I know that your family won 10 high school state titles from the state of Ohio. Correct or false?
Yeah. No, this is correct. And actually, I'm since I got out of coaching, I've returned to my roots. I'm back in Ohio. Obviously, I'm with RUDIS full time now. So glad to be home. Half hour from where I grew up and returning to my roots. So exciting stuff.
Nice. Okay. And so, and I guess I also heard just, I don't know the full story, but you have a connection to Jeff and Jim Jordan through your brothers and through wrestling, way all the back. We're going, I don't want to age you, right? But we're going way, way, way back.
Yeah. A little ways back. Yeah.
Well, how far back?
So yeah, the back a ways. Okay, so actually the Jordan family was instrumental into bringing my family into the sport. Jim and Jeff were, outside of my older brothers, were two of the guys that I looked up to, that I kind of, when I was aspiring to, formulate my goals and achieve success in athletics, you couldn't ask for two better role models than those guys. I mean, they both went 4 for 4 at the high school level. They were the second and third 4-timers in the state of Ohio.
Who was the first?
Mark Zimmerman.
Oh, who's that?
I believe he wrestled for Columbus DeSales.
Okay.
In late 70s, early 80s.
Did he have a good college career or no?
I believe he was an All-American. I'm trying to remember where Mark wrestled in college, but I believe he was an All-American.
Because that goes a little bit beyond my scope of knowledge. If we're going all the way back to the 80s. From the 80s, I tend to pride myself as a wrestling historian, and I know all of the best guys from, say, the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But say late 90s, 2000s, and on, I can name damn near every All-American. But if you go that far back, I'm kind of lost past the first few guys.
Yeah, and I think talking about the mental aspect of the sport, I think the history of wrestling is another overlooked thing. In our instant gratification society, everybody's looking for the next biggest thing and talking about the next biggest thing. But I think one of the cool things that we do here at RUDIS is honoring the legends of our sport. And,
absolutely.
And I think that's critical, that we stay connected. We keep these guys engaged and keep the spotlight on them, because they did so many amazing things in our sport, and we're instrumental in elevating the sport of wrestling. And I think, that's one of the things that we take very seriously, is honoring the legends of our sport and trying to keep them engaged and current in the sport as we possibly can. So that'll be, I know I was a little ambiguous about the media side of things, but those are some initiatives we're looking at as well, is really, re-engaging some of the legends that people maybe have not forgotten about, but
they don't know.
they're
They don't
looking
know
to
as much
encourage
about.
guys.
I mean,
Yeah.
people don't realize. I yell at my kids all the time. Not my kids, but the kids I coach. They don't realize. I mean, if we're even talking 12 years ago, right? Because Flow came around in 2007. But even in the beginning, they didn't have live video of matches. We're talking 12 years ago, 13 years ago. This is when I'm in college. I'm not that old, Matt. You couldn't find you had a hard time finding results of dual meets, let alone video of dual meets, let alone live video of dual meets. So
yeah, I mean, it wasn't that.
Yeah, I mean,
when
we're talking about the best of the best. When I'm growing up in the late '90s, it's like we had these VHS tapes of you finding people, but you couldn't watch your heroes. You couldn't watch these guys. So someone said, "Oh, that guy's so amazing." It's not like you just go on the internet and find video of this guy. It's like it was impossible. It just didn't exist. And so,
no, I mean, when you're talking about one of the guys that's a critical person for our company is Dave Schultz. But if you look online for Dave Schultz, like there's no matches out there, right? Which on one hand, it helps like create this mythological figure, but like, man, could you imagine if you actually had footage of Dave Schultz, like all these matches from the 80s and the 90s and these huge battles that he had with, Kenny Monday, Nate Carr, and then internationally, the international opponents he faced. And, could you imagine if you actually had footage of that?
No,
it's just not out. It's just not out there, right?
Yeah, that would be totally fantastic if we could have it. So I'm excited. You haven't even told me this, but now talking what you're getting at is that you guys are gonna put out some more Dave Schultz stuff, which you guys, RUDIS as a company, that you guys put out Dave Schultz clips that I've never seen. And like I said, I am a wrestling historian and I am a Dave Schultz fan, and I have searched for stuff, and you guys are putting out new stuff. So hopefully you'll put out some more new stuff. That would be really fantastic. And we'll get to see that. So, okay, back to you. We got off of you a little bit. Back to you.
Okay.
So you were a 4-time high school state champion. You went to Liberty University.
Three. I
thought you won 4.
No, I was a 3-time undefeated state champ.
What's your brother for?
No, my brothers. So I'm number 3. They went 2-2-3-3.
Okay, 2-2. That's pretty solid. Everyone won at least 2. The family. Yeah. That would suck if there was one brother that didn't win any state titles and he was kind of left out, and you guys picked on him every Thanksgiving.
That actually would be kind of fun. If you know the dynamics of me and my brother's relationship, that would be a good conversation to be had. We would love to have it. Unfortunately, we can't. So
yeah. Okay, so then you went to Liberty University, and then you started your coaching career right after that. So take us through your coaching career, and I know obviously you ended up with head coaching jobs at both Clarion and Binghamton before you took the job at RUDIS. So I guess walk us through that process.
Yeah. So my first introduction to college coaching was right here in Ohio at Ohio Northern with Ron Beachler. Got my start there. Spent 3 years there coaching at Ohio Northern. Then I got the opportunity to go to Penn State. Was there pretty much the most, the bulk of my coaching career was at Penn State in a variety of roles. I was
how many years?
Head assistant.
8 years, 9 years?
Just almost 8. Almost 8.
Okay.
Yeah. So served as a head assistant, head director of recruiting. Also served as the head coach of the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club. Had some cool experiences there. Helped bring a team trophy back to Happy Valley for the first time in a decade, and then followed that up. When Cael came on, I was a holdover from the previous staff and had the pleasure of bringing the first national title back to Happy Valley in over 50 years. So that was kind of a cool experience.
Nice. Yeah. Who's your favorite? From there,
go ahead. My favorite. Wow.
Favorite kid to coach. Question. I'm going to favorite kid to coach. Come on. Let's go first Sunderland era before we go to the Sanderson era.
Sure. So Sunderland era. So there was 2 guys. Well, there's a number of guys.
Moore.
Actually, my brother was on staff with me.
Okay.
He was actually on staff at Penn State before me and actually coached Josh more. Tim did. I didn't get a chance. I came the year after Josh graduated, so I didn't have the opportunity to coach Josh, but my brother Tim did. And obviously the guys in that area, the Sunderland era, guys that I was extremely close to were guys like Phil Davis, Bubba Jenkins.
Yeah.
Molinaro was kind of a crossover guy. Aaron Onspach was a national finalist for us, and
remember him.
Person I'm very, very, very close to. So those are the guys that I was probably the closest with during the Sunderland era. And then actually my last recruit as the director of recruiting in that crossover era between Sunderland to Cael was Ed Ruth. Ed Ruth was my last recruit in that role.
Well, that's a pretty damn good recruit right there. I know. You know what? And I knew about Ed early because Coach Smith at Missouri, he always finds these diamonds. I don't know how he does it, but and I guess you'd probably even consider me a diamond in the rough. But he always finds these diamonds in the rough, and so I remember he was recruiting Ed as a sophomore in high school. And I don't even think Ed had very many accomplishments to that time, but he said, you got to watch this kid. This is going to be really good. And then obviously, I think for Ed's senior year, I believe he went to Blair. Is that right?
He did. So little known fact. We're talking about history and stuff that's exciting.
Well, Ed's not that old. So
no, he's not that old, but he never won a state title in PA.
Damn.
And actually his sophomore and junior year, Quentin Wright.
Okay.
Another guy recruited.
Yep.
Quentin Wright.
Another guy who's really good.
Yeah. Beat Ed in the state semifinals.
Both years?
Sophomore and junior year. Both years. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Well, that's
so yeah. Ed was the guy, like, talking about finding diamonds in the rough. He's a guy like we knew about. People in PA knew who Ed was, but he never won a state title, so he wasn't high in the recruiting rankings.
And I don't believe he competed a lot, like in Fargo or that type of stuff either.
No, he actually never wrestled freestyle. I mean, really the only time he engaged in freestyle, he made a world team, a senior level world team. But before and after that, he never really competed in freestyle too much. So I remembered Ed's junior year down at Virginia Beach at high school nationals. He made it to the finals and blew this guy out, beat him by like 12 points or something like that. I'm like, here we go. I was like, the cat's out of the bag now. The few guys like Brian and myself who knew this guy's like, all right, now it's going to get interesting. The recruiting fight for this guy's going to get interesting because now everybody knows what a freak he is.
Mm-hmm. So okay, so then after that you I know when Cael came in, I believe you worked for the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club before going to Clarion, right?
Yes. So I was on staff at Penn State, but I was also the head freestyle coach for the NLWC. Had the opportunity to be a world team coach during my tenure as the head coach of the NLWC, and then went to Clarion for a very brief time. I was the head coach at Clarion and was able to help lead that program into the top 20 for the first time in over 15 years. And then I took my final pit stop in coaching was upstate New York.
So let me ask you a question. I'm not exactly on the timeline here, but your time at Clarion, does that coincide with Bekzad Abdulrahmanov?
Yes. I coached Beck that year. I was at Clarion. Bekzad was third in the country, and James Fleming was fifth.
He had a meat chokehold. Remember, he would choke everyone.
We'll get into that.
Come on, dude.
I would call it a face lock. It was a face lock.
Dog.
It was a face lock. It wasn't a chokeout. And that's the one thing that you almost had to start educating.
Well, listen, I'm
good
with choking people, Matt. I'm good with that. If you could do it in not a cheating manner, like you don't have an arm in there. If you can lock up, say, a cradle from a headlock tight enough to put a little pressure on someone's carotid artery or their throat, their windpipe. Listen, I think that's perfectly okay. I think as a grown man, you should be able to protect your own neck a little bit. So, I'm okay with what James Fleming did, but man, it sure looked like a chokehold to me.
And everybody said it was a choke. I'm just saying it was a face lock. But I'm all about choking. My younger brother Timmy, had a devastating front headlock. He put a lot of people to sleep with that one.
Damn. Which one? Which one did he go to? We're talking freestyle for headlock or folk style?
Both.
Oh, okay.
I think this is the highest compliment you could ever receive. So I had the opportunity on occasion. My older brother was coached by Dave Schultz up in Wisconsin, and so we got to be around him a little bit. And Dave, one of the great things about Dave was like he could learn from anybody. If you were a 5-year-old and had a move that he'd never seen or thought would work, he'd be, hey, show me that move. Well, he saw my brother doing his front headlock, and he's like, hey, Timmy, can you show me what you're doing there? And Tim was like, I was actually going to ask you the same thing. Like, how do you do yours? And so he had Timmy show his front headlock to him. He's like, you got it. You got it. I was like, you couldn't have a higher compliment from anybody in the world telling you your front headlock was on the money. So that's kind of a cool story.
So back to Clarion, I don't ever get, and maybe you didn't recruit him. I'm not sure, but I don't get why more people don't go try to get foreigners. In the handful of times that it has happened in say the past 15 years, right? You got Gael from Oklahoma State. You got Abdurakhmanov. One was from Clarion, I believe. The other one went to Harvard. No, American. He's at Harvard now.
Musafar.
It seems to turn out pretty well. Why don't people? Is it that hard to get them into school, or what's the deal? Why people don't recruit foreign guys more?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of things. Like you said, number one, that just from a wrestling standpoint, are they going to be able to cross over and wrestle folk style? Right?
Yeah,
are they going to be able to master top, bottom, those different things? So just from the wrestling side of things, that's would their style translate into college? Which I think is a legitimate question. But then, two, getting them a student visa, getting them into school, getting their board scores to a level, getting them admitted into school. I mean, there's a lot of red tape when you're recruiting international athletes. But I tell you what, a guy like Mark Cody, he figured it out and did it very, very well. He with Musafar, with Gambayar Sanja, right?
Yep.
He's a guy that figured it out. But like you said, the guys that have come over here, they've done pretty good. Beck, Beck
Galagayev was an animal.
He's a complete beast.
Musafar was really good. And then there was the one kid, there was the Mongolian kid that was at Citadel, who was really good.
What was his name again?
It was one of those really long, weird ones. I don't recall what it was. I wouldn't. I couldn't remember it. But they all tend to be really tough, and obviously, there's not a collegiate type system in any of those countries. So any of those guys who want to go get an education, and maybe you're not getting the number one because they know they're going to be on the national team and they're going to get that stipend. But beyond that, who knows? Might be a nice fit for someone to go steal all of Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan's best high school kids, right?
Well, let's be on the lookout next week for the next big college foreigner, right? At the World Championship.
Well, if they're young enough. Well, if they're young enough, you might. But if I was a college coach, maybe watching Cadet Worlds or Junior Worlds, passing out the business cards and calling it a day.
Yeah.
So let's actually get into recruiting, because that was one of the topics we talked about. So just 3 days ago, October 15th, the recruiting rules, and really I think it's going to change the recruiting landscape. But I don't know if you want to term it recruiting, right? But you can now, if you're a college kid, you're not happy with the situation. Prior to this, you had to ask for permission to get contacted by another college. And now all you have to do is you have to go throw your name in a pool. It goes on to the internet. Any other college coach can then look at the pool, and they can contact you without having permission. So I guess you spent a lot more time college coaching than I did. How do you feel about this new change in, I don't know if you'll call it recruiting, transferring, whatever you want to call it, the dynamics of the way this is going to work?
Well, I think it precedes this new legislation that was rolled out a couple of days ago. I think a couple years ago when the NCAA like opened the doors to start recruiting, where you could officially start recruiting underclassmen. I think that was the first mistake,
Sure.
because when you got a 16-year-old kid making a lifelong decision when he's hasn't even experienced any of life,
Yeah.
and I think that's a mistake. I think
Absolutely.
there's so much pressure. Now there's hype machines out there, right, to get your name out there. Basically, putting on the hat like basketball players.
Yep.
I've decided to take my talents wherever, to Ohio State, to Penn State, to Iowa.
Yeah.
I think there's a social pressure to make a decision earlier because everybody's doing it, and it's just So I think that in and of itself, opening up the recruiting to underclassmen, I think that's a mistake because
yeah. So I
you're
totally
going to
agree.
make mistakes.
I totally agree. I think asking kids that young to make decisions on their college future. I think asking seniors to make college decisions on the future is already tough enough. But okay, so now Matt, say you're a college coach, right? Which obviously you were for many years. And someone wants to get their name on that list, right? They say, "Hey, Coach Dernlan, I want to put my name on this list." I mean, part of me feels like you probably already have a realization that you don't have a great relationship with that athlete. Part of me says that, but who knows? Maybe it comes out of the blue. Are you saying, okay, go on the list? Are you saying, no, obviously you can't stop them. Are you saying, don't do that? Are you trying to talk them out of it? Are you kicking them off the team? How are you treating that action?
I'll just speak from my personal experiences and my decisions and how I tried to handle those things. I was always of the mindset that, look, if you're not happy, let's find you a place where you could be happy, right?
Yeah.
Because you never know what life is actually going to be like until you actually get on the college campus,
Yes.
And so there's a variety of factors that may not be working out for kids, and people just think it's just central, it's just a wrestling decision, but a lot of times it's bigger than that. A
Oh,
lot of
it's way bigger than that, right? It's a life
Yeah.
decision. That's where you're going to get your education, your future job, probably your spouse, a whole bunch of things.
Yeah. So I mean, it could be like, I'm too far from home. I want to be closer to home. That's a real thing. Maybe I thought this school offered this specific major. I get there, I try out this major, and it's like, no, I thought I wanted to be an engineer, and then I found out, 90% of engineering is doing math, and I hate math. So I don't want to do it. I don't want to do engineering. So maybe I need to find another school where I can find a better educational opportunity. But the majority of times it is a wrestling decision. But I think there are a variety of factors outside of wrestling that go into kids maybe wanting to get a release and go elsewhere. So I think sometimes we get fixated just on, this is a wrestling decision. Primarily, it probably is, but a lot of times there are other factors that are other mitigating circumstances that are involved. But I always took the position, hey, if you're not happy, let's find a place where you can be happy. Now, that being said, do I think should there be consequences to leaving? I do think there should be consequences to leaving as well.
But to clarify the rule, Matt, there are consequences. So you can put your name on that list. That doesn't mean you have a free and clear release, right? You still have to get your release, and your coach can still say, well, you can go to Minnesota, but you can't go to Iowa. The coach can still say that. That being said, as we've seen in recent years with social pressures from social media and whatnot, most kids are getting those releases. I think probably the highest profile case would have been Suriano to Rutgers. And I don't think Cael really wanted to give him that release, but I think through social pressure of the situation, Cael kind of almost felt obligated to give that release. So that release does not have to be given. But I think in current years, most of the time it is, in fact, given for them to go wherever they want to go.
Right. So let's clarify what the actual rule is. When you put your name on the list, what that allows you the opportunity to do is have conversations.
Yes.
Right. So it gives you the freedom to talk to whoever you want, which is like you said, one thing. That's all the rule is. On the flip side, if you want to go the next step further and actually get a release and transfer, then you have to go to the pre-existing policies of getting a institutional release and to a different institution. Now, primarily most conferences don't want don't want individuals transferring to someone they compete directly against. And I get that.
Fair.
So in the case of like Soriano, he's transferring within the Big Ten. He actually got his wish and was able to compete right away. But, I get Penn State's position. Number one, they invested a lot of time
for them,
and money.
I think Rutgers wasn't a national title contender at that point. So I think that's why they probably felt more comfortable doing that.
Sure, I think, but the other things, a lot of times when we start talking about these kids that want to transfer, we just focus solely on the kid when there's actually residual fallout for the program you're leaving. Take case in point, when Soriano left, what it didn't give Penn State the opportunity to do, and I think they still tried, but really put their full efforts into recruiting Spencer Lee, right?
They got Carson Kuhn, though.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you know what I mean? So, when they're making these commitments, you're talking about when you lose a guy like Soriano, the after effect is 1 to 2 years.
Maybe more.
Where you can find a suitable replacement for that guy. Plus, people got to understand when you're projecting out your 9.9 scholarships that you have to work with, I was working off a 5-year calendar, projecting out ahead what our finances were going to be in 2023. Like, okay, this is the money given our current roster and the state of affairs. This is the money that we're going to have in 2023 available. And when you have a major talent like Soriano leave, who's also, I would imagine, he was on a significant amount of money, that kind of disrupts the finances of the not only the talent of the program, but the finances of the program. And I think those are areas that a lot of people don't necessarily think about, how it has a bigger impact. It's not just as simple as like, oh, we'll just find the next guy, because when you're recruiting these kids now, we're talking about 2, 3, 4 years worth of effort to land this kid. So, I don't think, and I'm just trying to point out and give a broader point of context.
Sure. I think we're going to get into this. We're definitely not gonna have time to talk today, but I started putting something together about, early recruiting classes, who is the best one. And, when I look at stuff and I realize this isn't, this is probably a luxury for the top programs and maybe not a reality for some of the next tier or some of the ones that don't have 10 scholarships. But, one of the things that I'm looking at when I look at recruiting classes, I look at kind of depth of them, right? I want people to have a lot of people, and I don't count the number ones, maybe number twos, nearly as high as a lot of people do, because I'm under the realization that they all don't work out. And so if you have one of those smaller classes, but has a lot of, a couple really highly ranked guys, man, the chances that they're going to work out every time are really, really small. And
no, you better get, that's a critical thing. You
got to get depth
in every one of your recruiting classes.
And so, if you're recruiters, and people have this, and it's kind of one of the things that rage on my mental Mondays, is people have this assumption that if you're the best in high school, you're going to be the best in college. And that just is not the case. If you go look at any, they used to make those All-America posters they put on the walls. And if you go look through any of the past classes, you go number 1 through 14, you can't find one poster where half of those kids had really good college careers. Think about that. Think about that. Of the number ones, you can't find one poster where half of those kids had great college careers. And a lot of them, it's like 2 or 3 or 4. So when you're counting the number ones in high school classes, oh my God, they're going to be great, and there's only 2 of them in your class, that's tough because, hey, if 50% of those guys don't work out, that's going to be a hole in your lineup. You need depth when you're recruiting.
And that'll actually be another episode, is all the variables that go into transitioning from high school success or lack thereof into college success. And that's a really fascinating topic that I would like to discuss, like all the variables as a college coach and a college recruiter that you look into outside of the talent, outside of the wrestling talent that actually goes into transitioning into high level college success.
Yeah.
And you're a classic example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think overall, I would say I like this rule that just went into effect. I like the fact that it gives, I would say more rights to student athletes, more ability for them to find a home that's right. Because I think you and I may disagree slightly on this point, but most high school kids, and now you already mentioned that they're being pressured to do this earlier. They're being pressured to do this as sophomores, as juniors, let alone seniors, which I think is young enough. But they're being pressured to make a decision on their future, like literally everything in their future, over the course
and
of
it's not just
over the course of maybe one recruiting trip and 10 phone calls. Like, how is that how you're going to determine your future? That is just freaking, it's an unrealistic expectation that every kid or a high percentage of kids is going to pick the right decision off of those things.
And it's a broader conversation than that, Ben. It's actually the parents get pressured into this feeling as well, right? They get caught up, they get swept up in the emotion, they get, the pomp and circumstance of being, on the 50-yard line at a Big Ten football game, and all these things. I mean, it's not just the parents, it's not the kid, it's also the parents that get caught up in this emotion and this knee-jerk reaction into running and hurrying into making the decision. So your opinion is they should just have the freedom, if they made a bad choice, just let them out of that decision, and they should have that flexibility, the right. Would you actually go beyond that? It's like they should automatically get a release. Would you take this rule one step further?
Yeah, I would. Coaches don't have anything like that. Like if a coach chooses to change schools, it's not like they can't take a salary for a year, right? And we've seen lots of cases of that. I mean, Cael recruited, David Taylor and a few other people, and then he left to go to Penn State when he was at Iowa State. And a lot of it was social pressure, but the next coach in there, Kevin Jackson, felt the social pressure to let those guys go. Kyler, Andrew Long, David Taylor, to let those guys go to Penn State with Cael. But so coaches don't have those restrictions in their life. So why should an 18-year-old kid have those restrictions in life? And I get the type of damage it can do to the program. But here's the deal is you should be running a program where you aren't having people jump ship every other week. You should run a program where you have a decent enough relationship with your athletes that maybe they're coming to you with their problems way before they ever think about just throwing their name on a list to go get contacted by random colleges. And do I realize that some kids are going to be flaky? Absolutely. I obviously, understand that. But are those flaky kids really the best kids that you want on your team? Probably not. Those guys are probably bad influences on everyone in the culture of the program. So, might as well get those guys out of there and bring in some new, fresh talent that that's going to push your program somewhere.
Yeah, and I mean, you said it flaky. I would say it maybe a different way, but I really kind of reversed my course on recruiting transfers from early on in my career to later on in my career, just because you by and large, you kind of find out by and large that they're transferring for a reason. So as a college coach, you see a lot of guys like, yeah, I would take that guy, or I'd take that guy, or I'd take this transfer. I'm like, well, watch what you wish for, because most of the time they're probably transferring for a reason.
Yeah, they're not the model student and citizen. Not 100% of the time, but hey, we're going 80% of the time. There's some issue there.
Yeah. So I think kind of wrapping this portion of the conversation up, I would probably tend to say this isn't a black or white issue. I think there's a lot of shades of gray when you're talking about this.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of variables. I get where you're coming from. I don't necessarily agree with it, just because I lived a different perspective. I lived that college coaching lifestyle for so long, and I see it, overall, the effects, how it affects a program overall as a part of just focused on the individual. And, I think where you're coming from is just solely focused on the individual. And I get that. I think there's a lot of merit to that.
So, okay, Matt, so we didn't get into any type of preview today, but everyone knows it. The World Championships are coming up next week. And so our plan is to get on here, do a podcast the morning after every finals, right? So there's actually 4 days of men's freestyle wrestling, and that's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. But there's only the 3 days of finals. So it's the Sunday night, obviously their time, Monday night, and Tuesday night. All this is what Hungary time, which I don't know what damn time zone they're
Budapest.
in.
I believe I think they're 6 hours ahead of us.
So we're gonna hop on after every one of those finals happens, and talk about the wrestling. I mean, this is obviously the largest tournament in the world. Finally, with the way Flo has been covering things recently, the World Championships. Got Matt.
I believe it's actually
in 2007. I couldn't watch the World Championships, right? And I'm a senior level athlete. I literally couldn't find a way to. I remember trying to find a way to watch the World Championships live in 2007, and it just didn't exist.
And I believe actually isn't track wrestling? Aren't they? I
believe track wrestling
airing the World Championship? Yeah, I believe track wrestling has.
They're partnering with NBC in some way, shape, or form to air the championships live. So you and I will be watching that. I'm sure we'll be messaging back and forth, and we'll get in here and talk about it. And I'm excited. I think this is we don't have a lot of time left, but really good American team. I think there's definitely a chance for them to repeat. I think with the way the bracketing is, and I don't want to complain about UWW anymore, but there are obviously going to be some landmines because of the seating in every single bracket. So if we can get the right draws
or seating or lack thereof in the case of
it's kind of it's not real seating.
No, I want to get your thoughts on that because I think that's ridiculous. When you have arguably two of the best pound for pound guys in the country, Sadulayev and Snyder, neither one being seated at their weight class is insane.
I mean, you could literally argue that they're the number 1 and 2 pound for pound wrestlers on the planet Earth, and they can't figure out a way to seed them. So that's on UWW to create a system in which the seeds are actually the real seeds, because it doesn't matter if you're 1 through 4 at 97 kg, because the real, who knows, the real number 1 and 2 aren't really in the bracket, right? They could end up, Snyder and Sadulayev could end up right next to the number 1 guy. It could happen.
Yeah, they could end up against each other, right? I mean,
first round,
the number one seed could actually wrestle the actual number 1 seed first round of the tournament, which is crazy to think about.
So, which means the seeds don't really matter that much. So, I know we'll be getting on talking all about that. I'm glad everyone's with us on this journey. This is podcast number 1. I'm hoping this is going to be something that lasts for many years in the future. Matt, you got anything else for these guys?
No, that was a lot of fun. Looking forward to, for me, this takes a close second to the NCAA championships, the World Championships. So really excited for the next week of coverage. Excited for the opportunity, the history that's about to be made on a number of levels, and the different storylines and conversations that we're going to have. So looking forward to it.
All right, everyone, have a great day, and we will see you next week.